If you don't have a plan for your life, someone else does. The mission of Medicine Avenue is to influence what we link pain and pleasure to. Advertisers clearly understand that what drives us is not so much our intellect as the sensations that we link to their products. As a result, they've become experts in learning how to use exciting or soothing music, rapid or elegant imagery, bright or subdued color, and a variety of other elements to put us in certain emotional states. Then, when our emotions are at their peak, when the sensations are the most intense, they flash an image of the product continuously until we link it to these desired feelings. Pepsi employed this strategy brilliantly in carving out a bigger share of the lucrative soft drinks market from their major competitor, Coca-Cola. Pepsi observed the phenomenal success of Michael Jackson, a young man who had spent his entire life learning how to heighten people's emotion by the way he used his voice, his body, his face, and his gestures. Michael sang and danced in a way that stimulated huge numbers of people to feel incredibly good. So much so that they'd often purchased one of his albums to recreate the feelings. Pepsi asked, how can we transfer those sensations to our product? Their reasoning was that if people associated the same pleasurable feelings to Pepsi as they did to Michael Jackson, they'd buy Pepsi just as they bought his albums. The process of anchoring new feelings to a product or idea is the integral transference necessary to basic conditioning. But for now, consider this. Anytime we're in an intense emotional state, when we're feeling strong sensations of pain or pleasure, anything unique that occurs consistently will become neurologically linked. Therefore, in the future, whenever that unique thing happens again, the emotional state will return. You've probably heard of Ivan Pavlov, a Russian scientist who, in the late 19th century, conducted conditioned response experiments. His most famous experiment was one in which he rang a bell as he offered food to a dog, thereby stimulating the dog to salivate and pairing the dog's sensations with the sound of the bell. After repeating the conditioning enough times, Pavlov found that merely ringing the bell would cause the dog to salivate, even when food was no longer being given. What does Pavlov have to do with Pepsi now? First, Pepsi used Michael Jackson to get us in a peak emotional state. Then, at that precise moment, they flashed the product. Continuous repetitions of this created an emotional linkage for millions of Jackson fans. The truth is that Michael Jackson doesn't even drink Pepsi, and he wouldn't even hold an empty Pepsi can in his hand on camera. You might wonder, isn't this company crazy? They hired a guy for $50 million to represent them who doesn't even hold their product and tells everybody that he won't? What kind of spokesperson is this? What a crazy idea. Actually, it was a brilliant idea. Sales went through the roof, so high that LA geared and hired Michael for $20 million to represent their product. And today, because he's able to change the way people feel, he's what I call a state inducer. He and Sony CBS just signed a 10-year recording contract that's reputed to be worth more than $1 billion. His ability to change people's emotional states makes him invaluable. What we've got to realize is that this is all based on linking pleasurable sensations to specific behaviors. It's the idea that if we use the product, we'll live our fantasies. Advertisers had taught all of us that if you drive a BMW, then you're an extraordinary person with exceptional taste. If you drive a Hyundai, you're an intelligent and frugal. If you drive a Pontiac, you'll have an excitement. If you drive a Toyota, what a feeling you get. You're taught that if you wear obsession cologne, you'll soon be entwined in the throes of an androgynous orgy. If you drink Pepsi, you'll be able to jam with MC Hammer as the epitome of hip. If you want to be a good mom, then you feed your children hostess, fruit pies, cupcakes, and twinkles. Advertisers have noted that if enough pleasure can be generated, consumers are often willing to overlook the fear of pain. It is an advertising adage that sex sells, and there's no question that the pleasurable associations created in print and on TV by using sex do the job. Take a look at the trend in selling blue jeans. What are blue jeans anyway? They used to be work pants, functional, ugly. How are they sold today? They've become an international icon of everything that's sexy, fashionable, and youthful. Have you ever watched that Levi 501 jeans commercial? Can you explain one to me? They make no sense, do they? They're totally confusing. But at the end, you have a distinct impression that sex took place nearby. Does this type of strategy really sell blue jeans? You bet. Levi is the #1 blue jeans manufacturer in America today. Is the power of conditioning to shape our associations limited to products like soft drinks, automobiles, or blue jeans? Of course not. Take the lowly little raisin, for example. Do you know that in 1986, the California Raisin Advisory Board was expecting a huge harvest, yet they were beginning to panic? Year by year, they'd seen their sales dropping by 1% annually. In desperation, they turned to their advertising agency and asked what they could do. The solution was simple. They needed to change people's feelings about raisins. For most people, raisins were considered wimpy, lonely, and dull, according to Robert Finney, the former director of the Raisin Board. The task was clear: pump a healthy dose of emotional appeal into the shriveled up fruit. Link up sensations that people wanted. Shriveled and dried are not the sensations that people associate with feelings good about their lives. The raisin growers kept thinking, what can we associate to raisins that would make people really want to buy them? At the time, an old Motown hit was enjoying a national resurgence. I heard it through the grapevine. Raisin grower thought, what if we can take these sensations that make so many people feel good and link them to raisins to make them seem hip? They hired an innovative animator named Will Vinton, who then created about 30 clay raisin figures, each with a distinct personality, to boogie the Motown tune. In those moments, the California Raisins were born. Their first ad campaign created an instant sensation and successfully linked the sensations that the raisin growers hoped for. As people watched the hip little raisins dance, they linked strong feelings of fun, humor, and pleasure to the once boring fruit. The raisin had been reinvented in the essence of California cool, and the unspoken message of each of these ads was that if you ate them, you'd be hip too. The upshot? The raisin industry was rescued from its devastating slump in sales to a 20% growth factor annually. The raisin growers had succeeded in changing people's associations. Instead of linking boredom to the fruit, consumers had learned to link sensations of excitement and fun. Of course, The use of advertising as a form of conditioning is not limited to physical products. Fortunately or unfortunately, we consistently see television and radio used as a tool for changing what we associate to candidates in the political process. No one knows this better than the master political analyst and union shaper Roger Ailes, who was responsible for key elements of Ronald Reagan's successful 1984 campaign against Walter Mondale, and who in 1988 masterminded George Bush's successful campaign against Michael Dukakis. Ailes designed a strategy to convey three specifically negative messages about Dukakis: that he was soft of defense, the environment and crime, and the people caused to link painful sensations to him. One had portrayed Dukakis as a kid playing war in a tank. Another seemed to blame him for pollution in the Boston Harbor. The most notorious one showed criminals being released from Massachusetts jail through a revolving door, and played on the widespread negative publicity generated around the country by the Willie Horton incident. Convicted murderer Willie Horton, released from jail as a part of a controversial furlough program in Dukakis' home state, failed to return and 10 months later was arrested for terrorizing a young couple, raping the woman and assaulting the man. Many people took issue with the negative force of these ads. Personally, I found them highly manipulative. But it's hard to argue with the level of success based on the fact that people do more to avoid pain than to gain pleasure. Many people didn't like the way the campaign was fought, and George Bush was one of those people. But it was hard to argue with the reality that pain was a very powerful motivator in shaping people's behavior. As Ailes says, the negative ads cut through quicker. People tend to pay more attention to these type of ads. People may or may not slow down to look at a beautiful picturesque scene along the highway, but everyone looks at an auto accident. There is no questioning it of the effectiveness of Ali's strategy. Bush won a clear majority of the popular vote and soundly trounced Dukakis in one of the biggest landslides in electoral college history. The force shaping world opinion and customer buying habits is also the same force that shapes all of our actions. It's up to you and me to take control of this force and decide on our own actions consciously, because if we don't direct our own thoughts, we'll fall under the influence of those who would condition us to behave the way they desire. Sometimes those actions are what we would have selected anyway, sometimes not. Advertisers understand how to change what we link pain and pleasure to by changing the sensations we associate with their products. If we want to take control of our lives, we must learn to advertise in our own minds. And we can do this in a moment. How? Simply by linking pain to the behaviors we want to stop at such a high level of emotional intensity that we won't even consider those behaviors any longer. Aren't there things you would never ever do? Think of the sensations you link to those. If you link those same feelings and sensations to the behaviors you want to avoid, you'll never do them again either. Then simply link pleasure to the new behavior you desire for yourself. Through repetition and emotional intensity, you can condition these behaviors within yourself until they are automatic. So what's the first step in creating a change? The first step is simply to become aware of the power that pain and pleasure exert over every decision and therefore every action that we take. The art of being aware is understanding that these linkages between ideas, words, images, sounds, and sensations of pain and pleasure are happening constantly.